Spotlight is a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. It seeks to spotlight people, places, and events from around the Diocese of Youngstown that promote the new gospel of joy called for by Pope Francis. Your program host is Father James Corda.
Hello and welcome to Spotlight. I'm Father Jim Corda. Joining me today is Nancy Voitis and Melissa Miller. It's nice to have you on the show today.
Thank you for having us.
And we're going to talk about food insecurity and food security. So why don't we start with the insecurity first?
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about that, Nancy.
Well, food insecurity is the term we use to refer to a condition where people either have a lack of resources to access food. Generally, we say people that are worried about where their next meal is going to come from, we usually refer to as food insecure. So estimating, there's an estimate that there's about almost 49 million people across the United States that are food insecure, or one in 8 worldwide. Even with all of the resources out there, there's 3 major programs that we usually try to make sure people access: WIC, food stamps, which is now referred to as SNAP, and of course I'm going to forget the school lunch program, the free school lunch program. And there's an estimate that only 60% of people that are actually food insecure are even accessing those programs as well. So that's the general concept around food insecurity, is that it's the concern about where our next meal is coming from, because we may not have the resources to get them.
We'll talk a little bit more about that specifically in a moment. I want to bring Melissa in to talk about food security, so to give it a positive twist. And what do you mean by that?
So again, as Nancy mentioned, we talk about people having access to safe food that's not contaminated. That's, there have been so many food recalls. Mm-hmm. So that's another piece of food security or food insecurity, is access to safe food, access to healthy, nutritionally healthy foods. So fresh fruits and fresh vegetables, which are a real issue, as we were speaking about. Many places throughout the Mahoning Valley and the diocese are really in what are termed food deserts. There's not a grocery store within a reasonable distance to them. There's not, they maybe don't have access to a car. They have to walk to a grocery. Maybe they have to use a corner store as their grocery store, or a gas station. And what's available there is often processed and not really fresh food. So again, in addition to not maybe having the money to purchase them, there isn't any place nearby where they can find fresh, healthy foods that have the nutritional value that we need.
I'm sorry. I was going to say some of the correlations with food insecurity happen to be things like physical and mental health are both affected by food insecurity. Maternal health. This area has a high infant mortality rate. One of the things we obviously look at is diet, as well as other factors that might contribute to that. So, as Melissa said, having good, nutritious food that's not processed is really something that's critical for a lot of people. It's often said too that there's food available out there. It's a lot of time connecting people with it that need it. As you mentioned, I'm glad you mentioned the food deserts, because there are some areas of town, like the east side or the near north side, that have very little access to getting good food. Some people rely on food pantries, and they may use they may walk. So one of the things we tried to do was get carts to some of the pantries, so that people at least had a pull cart to take some things home with. But
I know prior to the taping, Melissa and I were talking specifically about some of that situation. And I remember growing up, my grandfather having a garden and he was not the only one, but most people had gardens then. And so that was some opportunity to have your own fresh food. And not only that, but there was a sense of sharing it with other people. So that whole concept really has become diminished over the years. Is there any reason why we went from having what I would consider food security and accessibility to a real sense of insecurity and non-accessibility to food? What would be the reasons why that crept in?
Well, I think as our society changed and people live in more urban areas, also, I think that culturally, we go to the grocery store. What do we need a farmer for? We can just go to the grocery store. I think it's an education piece. I think it's changes in our society, changes in our culture, kind of a big business. And I'm, as a farmer, really happy to see that. I think the pendulum is swinging back a little bit, and people are more cognizant of where their food is coming from, and I'm happy about that.
I think we've seen that with the economy. We've seen we've become a society of convenience, where it's easy to zap something in the microwave or go through fast food, and making choices that are people think are economical, but in the long run they're not very healthy or nutritional. And there's been a lot of studies around the links between poverty and obesity because of the you're eating a lot of processed food, as you mentioned. You're not eating the fresh things, and it's a convenience issue. And
we're down to the last 3 minutes of our time, our first segment. Let's talk a little bit about that whole sense of the economic disparity that's there, because we've put people in that situation sometimes where their only access to food might be a dollar store or might be a gas station because of economics, or because of they just don't have transportation to get there, or they're elderly, or whatever the reason. How do we educate those people to the fact that there's other options available? How do we begin to do that?
Well, one aspect that I can think of is we've done. I think school systems are doing a good job with the free and reduced lunch programs. So people that are eligible for those programs hopefully are getting their kids enrolled. And I think you're starting to see more education kind of trickling through that process, where they're realizing that we might be able to give somebody lunch, but now what are they going to do for the weekend? So you hear about these backpack programs that places like Second Harvest Food Bank have done in partnership with schools. So I think one vehicle is to keep getting information maybe out through the schools back to the families and through some of these programs. I think the media and, we hear a lot about, I'm hearing more and more about the farmers market and these things, so I think they're doing a great job in getting the word out as well.
And I think we're going to talk about the farmers market in just a moment. We are going to take a quick break, and I think that's one of the thrusts that we would like to educate the folks that are with us today, that there are farmers markets available for their use, and even online, as you had mentioned. We're going to take a quick break, so stay with us. We'll be right back.
What have you done for your marriage today?
I gave my wife a hug this morning. I told her I love her. Instead of sitting on the couch, I hope to clean up.
I cooked my husband's favorite breakfast.
I sent my husband a love email.
What have I done for my marriage today? It's a good question.
I gave her a call and say thinking of her and the kids.
I did her hair this morning. I think it looks pretty good.
We're going to the museums as a family. What have I done for my marriage today?
I made my wife coffee and breakfast this morning.
It's going to be her birthday next week, so I've been spending time today making arrangements to make that extra special.
Oh, we're spending the day together.
I bought her an orchid.
Hassan was able to let me sleep in by taking care of him in the morning.
I read the newspaper to my wife, and it cracked her up. She's still laughing.
What have you done for your marriage today? Small changes can make a world of difference. Get started at foryourmarriage.org. A message from the Catholic Church.
The Johnsons enjoy Friday dinners out. Nothing fancy, just time together to reconnect as family. They make sure others eat as well. By giving to Catholic Charities of Youngstown, the Johnsons join other angels who care for those in need, regardless of religion or race. Show your wings with a gift to Catholic Charities, changing lives one family at a time, providing housing, emergency financial assistance, senior services, and more. Give now at ccdoy.org.
Welcome back to our show. I'm talking with Nancy Voitis and Melissa Miller on food security and insecurity. Before we took a quick break, we ended with the whole idea of farmers markets. And that is something that's really burgeoning, I think, in our area and hopefully around the country. Melissa, tell us a little bit about how you're intimately involved with that.
So I work with a nonprofit in Youngstown, and we collaborate with St. Elizabeth's Hospital on a farmers market in a couple areas that are food deserts. The main campus at St. E's on Belmont obviously is in a food desert. The north side of Youngstown has a market called the North Side Farmers Market, which is currently at the Unitarian Church, but moving across Wick Park to the Community Action Program. At HMHP, we have a terrific program that offers a fruit and vegetable prescription to folks who are patients of the outpatient clinics at the HM facilities, and those people have conditions that could be affected by diet, so obesity, diabetes, heart disease. Those people get a prescription from their physician and some education. It's a $25 voucher that they can spend only at the farmer's market, only on fresh fruits and vegetables. So that's a huge education piece. HM has generously monitored the program. They meet with patients and educate them. They meet them halfway through the farmer's market season. Again, weights. Have you lost weight? Have you gained weight? How's your blood pressure doing? Things like that. And then 3 more months of the farmer's market prescription program, and then another session at the end. So huge education piece to people, and gives them the little voucher that gives them a boost to buy those fresh fruits and vegetables, which we know are expensive. On the other hand, that $25, those vouchers, are going directly back into the hands of local farmers, people who are growing food here in Ashtabula County, Trumbull County, Mahoning County, and that money circulates right back into our own economy. Those farmers spend their money at the gas station, at the tractor store, for their seeds, right in their own community. And that's another piece of food security. They're creating jobs. Food is a piece of economic development in our area, and we've thought about economic development as being steel mills and car factories, but food is something that we all participate in 3 times a day or more, and food is an important piece of economic development as well.
And I think the other thing is that our area, for example, is pretty arable. We had talked about that earlier before the taping, and why not take advantage of something like that? I guess the question that comes to my mind is we've recently had a pretty nasty winter. And so what do we do during those cold months? You know, we find ourselves in the fall now, but what do we do during those cold months? How do we continue that program and that process of food security?
Well, I think that we can look back and think about what kinds of things we had access to when we were young, and were there kiwis in the grocery store in the wintertime? Or, you know, does a salad in the winter mean cabbage and coleslaw, things that store? Does it mean radishes and carrots? You know, I think we have to think about not the lettuce that comes from California, but the things that we can grow and preserve right here in our own community. On the north side of Youngstown, there's a community kitchen, a shared use community kitchen that you can rent for a very nominal fee per hour. If your church has a garden, if your community, if your neighborhood can come together with the bushels of tomatoes that they grew and rent that kitchen and can up 100 quarts of sauce, that everybody has access to, maybe not fresh, but good quality food.
That's one of the things we're trying to do when we see people coming in for emergency assistance where maybe they're having trouble with rent or utilities, and we're trying to work people now more on budgeting and money management and showing them, you know, better choices that they can make around food, and we even worked with the Ohio State Extension Office to do some cooking classes around helping people making better choices. When they complete the program, we're giving them a crock pot and some kitchen utensils and things like that that they can, have then to make their kitchen better. We also, when we're looking at budget, sometimes we've had to work with people around accessing some of the pantries or the markets so that they can access food that might be available. Second Harvest, I know a lot of times gets fresh vegetables or fresh produce that they'll distribute at different locations. And so we'll make sure and work with some of the different pantries so people can maybe save some money on the food side, make some better choices, but then have some of that income go towards maybe the utility they're behind on or some things like that. So the education process, I think that's something we're trying to do more and more of for people. It's not just putting a Band-Aid on something, it's what are we going to do, how is this going to be sustainable, how are we going to, how does this affect all of the things that you're spending money on?
And I think that's the thrust of it all, is to sustain a program that you've started that's working, that's educating people, and part of the component in the program is how do you continue that program? Mm-hmm. How do you evaluate it? What can you do better to make sure that it's reaching a broader group of people? Is this phenomenon that's working here in our area, is that going on in other parts of the country as well?
I think we've seen a lot of movement around certainly the education process. Certainly there's been some incentives for nonprofits to get funds so that they can enroll people in SNAP, which is what most people know as food stamps, to make sure that people are enrolled in WIC, that they're accessing some of these different programs. I think, we've certainly seen across, the Catholic Charities Network across the country a lot more attention around this whole issue of food and all of the attention it's getting. And I think the farmers market movement is something.
I think so as well. I think that actually farmers markets and local food are issues or things that people have known about in other parts of the country certainly much longer, but it's come to the Mahoning Valley in our part of Ohio a little more recently. But I think that in the Youngstown area, I see lots of action and rebuilding community. The Youngstown Neighborhood Development Corporation in Youngstown, Trumbull Neighborhood Partnership in Warren, really reaching out to their communities and encouraging them to grow food, to cook food, to learn about food preservation. And then the agency that I work with, Commonwealth, to provide this shared use kitchen. The City of Youngstown in participating in that, helping fund that. I think these are areas that we're seeing a lot of action in our area, and I'm really hopeful. I think that we are rebuilding community, and in a community we'll take care of each other.
We'll talk a bit more about that, but we're going to take a quick break. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.
Johnsons enjoy Friday dinners out. Nothing fancy, just time together to reconnect as family. They make sure others eat as well. By giving to Catholic Charities of Youngstown, the Johnsons join other angels who care for those in need, regardless of religion or race. Show your wings with a gift to Catholic Charities, changing lives one family at a time, providing housing, emergency financial assistance, senior services, and more. Give now at ccdoy.org.
Light Moments. Here's Father Tom McSweeney.
Jack Canfield, co-author of the book Chicken Soup for the Soul, was driving home from work when he passed a park where two Little League teams were playing baseball. And he decided to watch, and he took a seat on the bench behind first base. When he asked one of the boys what the score was, the youngster responded with this big smile that his team was behind 14-0. And Mr. Canfield, surprised by the boy's happy mood, asked him why he wasn't discouraged. And the boy looked puzzled and said, well, why should we be discouraged? We haven't even been up to bat yet. In this child's eyes, nothing was impossible. If the other team could score 14 runs in one inning, so could his team. And the same holds true in our lives. There are times when things seem to go wrong and we seem to be beaten, but human beings have the ability to make a comeback. With faith in yourself and with God's help, all things are possible.
This message from the Christophers.
Welcome back to Spotlight. We were talking all about farmers markets and food sustainability, accessibility. One topic that we really never spent a lot of time on is the actual reality of hunger related to poverty. That's very prevalent in our area, but I think around the country. What are some of those statistics that are startling, that get us to think about the need for more food security?
Well, Ohio is one of the top 10 states that is listed as having a high prevalence of food insecurity, which it kind of hits you sometimes because you think, that, we are, hopefully a very progressive state and progressive area, but when you hear things, that 16% of people in Ohio have food insecurity and that we're one of the top 10 states, that our area has one of the highest rates of infant mortality and other issues, it kind of gives you pause. So certainly, hearing some of the great new initiatives, and I agree with what Melissa said at the end of the last segment, is there are so many good things happening in this area. We've got some great organizations that are convening people and bringing them together, but it really is a prevalent issue. If you look at the percentage of schools that have free and reduced lunches, I just done a talk up in the Matthews School District where their free and reduced lunch percentage is about 23%. You go down the road to Liberty, which is a couple of miles, it jumps to 60%. You go further down the road into Youngstown, you're hitting some schools that are almost 90 to 100%. So there's a real prevalence. Youngstown, unfortunately, last year was named the city of Youngstown to have the highest incidence of concentrated poverty in the nation. So there's some startling, things that give you pause to say, okay, what is the problem here, and why are these statistics so skewed in an area where we feel like there's so much abundance? You drive down 422 or 224, you see the restaurants with packed parking lots on a Tuesday night, any day of the week, and you think, how can there really be people hungry in our area? But they are, especially the children, which, really getting, to some of the families with children that are kind of lost out there. So continuing to get the word out about not only emergency services that we can link people up with through our agency and through other social service agencies, but then also linking them up with some of the more sustainable long-term projects where it's not just the emergency assistance, it's now we're looking at long-term solutions from a community standpoint, which I find just so encouraging.
Right, and many, as you mentioned, the OSU extension programs are often free.
Yes.
YNDC, the Youngstown Neighborhood Development Corporation, offers these cooking classes.
Yes.
They are free. These are things that, again, we're not giving a man a fish, we're teaching them. We're teaching folks to garden. We're talking to people about maybe making a little income from their garden, whether it be at selling at a farmer's market, whether it be using the kitchen to value add to a product. You can use this kitchen. You make a great cheesecake. You make a great product. Maybe you could sell that to a restaurant. It's a commercial kitchen. It's certified. So finding ways to both encourage people to eat more healthy, but also to create wealth for themselves, so that they can have a sense of ownership of food, of their own destiny. These are just great projects that are going on, in our own community that people don't know about.
And I think there's that whole sense of we do this together as a community. And there's a relational component that sometimes we omit in a lot of our programs and projects, that we have a relationship with those people that we're trying to educate or trying to help get to better food security. And what better place to start than with our young children?
Right.
And with food. We're all eaters. Everyone is an eater.
Sure.
And so everyone can participate. We have an online market called the Lake to River Online Market. It's similar to Amazon. You just sign on, click and shop. You're buying from all local farmers. You go to the location, which is on the north side of Youngstown, and pick up your box, and you have access to products that are grown all over the region, from Ashtabula County to apples down here in southern Mahoning County. And we take EBT, we take the WIC coupons. Again, farmers markets are hearing that let's make food accessible to all.
Is there a website? Is there a website for that?
There is. It's just laketoриver.org, and it's an e-commerce site. It's as simple to use as Amazon.
And what about locally here in the Youngstown area? What access could people have to get in touch with what they can do?
Well, certainly one of the easiest ways to find services is to call 211. It's the simplest way to get access to many of the services that are available, from food to utilities to rent. Catholic Charities, we also have a website, ccdoy.org, or they can call the office in any of the counties that we serve. One of the things that, things like the farmers market, and even with some of the programs we're doing, we're trying to emphasize 3 different things: empowerment of people to take responsibility for themselves, self-sufficiency, where they're not just, dependent on other people helping them, but they're learning how to help themselves, and the whole issue of resiliency. I mean, people are very resilient if you give them, I think, the tools to bounce back from situations that they're in. So certainly, there's so many good things going on that can help people achieve that.
Melissa Miller, just one final comment before we close.
Well, I would encourage people to seek out a way to buy locally, to support what's going on locally, whether it's at a farmer's market, whether it's asking at a restaurant or at your grocery store. Where did this come from? Do you have anything that's from a local farmer? And support these efforts to take ownership of our own food production.
And Nancy Voitis, one quick comment.
Just to continue to educate yourself, whether you're in a situation where you are insecure with food, or if you're in a situation where maybe you want to do something, educate yourself about the hunger issue and then the different projects out here in the community that you might be a part of.
Well, thank you both for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
And thank you for being with us. Have a good day, and God be with you.
Spotlight has been a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. Your program host was Father James Corda.
Their numbers are growing. More than a year ago, more than a decade ago. More people now living in this state than nearly any state in the Union. 1 out of every 10 families in America. 1 out of every 6 children in America. 33 million Americans teetering on the brink of hunger, sickness, hardship. 33 million Americans descending into poverty. And as their futures fall, so does our nation's. By the time we can walk, each of us yearns for the joy that comes from being able to do for ourselves. Church World Service believes that being self-reliant is a joy everyone should share. So around the block or around the world, share the joy. Church World Service.